Let's talk about something that sounds like it's straight out of science fiction. Imagine someone who struggles with the simplest daily tasks, but at the same time possesses a level of genius that is just staggering. This is the incredible paradox of savant syndrome, a condition where profound disability and unbelievable brilliance exist in the very same person. So, how is this even possible? Let's dive in. Here's our game plan. First, we'll unpack that central paradox of genius and disability. Then, we're going to look at the science, how the brain can actually get rewired to create these amazing skills. After that, things get really interesting as we uncover evidence that these abilities might be hiding inside every one of us. And finally, we'll talk about what all this means for the future of human potential. All right, let's start with the heart of the matter, this incredible contradiction. Savant syndrome is all about these jarring contrasts, where you see this unbelievable talent just shining through in the most unexpected ways. The brilliant neurologist Oliver Sacks really gave us the best way to think about this. He said we shouldn't see these skills as just some weird side effect of a disability. No, he said we should think of them as a totally different way of seeing the world. One where certain mental abilities aren't just preserved, they're actually boosted, enhanced. And to really see this paradox in action, look no further than Kim Peek. He was the real person who inspired the movie Rain Man. On one hand, his brain was physically different. He was missing the main connection between the two halves, and his motor skills were so impaired he couldn't even button his own shirt. But on the other hand, the man was a living encyclopedia. He could read 2 pages of a book at once, one with his left eye, one with his right, and he remembered word for word everything from over 12,000 books. It's just mind-boggling. So it turns out not all savant abilities are the same. Researchers have kind of sorted them into 3 different levels. The most common are what they call splinter skills, memorizing tons of trivia or phone books. Then you have talented savants, whose skills are just incredible, especially given their disability. But then you have the prodigious savants. These are the people whose abilities would be considered genius in anyone, and they are incredibly rare. It's thought there are fewer than 100 of them alive in the entire world today. Okay, so that's the what. Now for the big question. How in the world does this happen? Let's get into the leading theory, which is this fascinating idea that brain injury or just different development can actually create what some scientists call a pathology of superiority. The main idea has a bit of a fancy name, hemispheric compensation, but really the concept is pretty straightforward. Think of your brain's 2 halves. For most people, the left side is the logical, language-loving boss. The right side is more artistic, spatial, and intuitive. The theory goes that if the left hemisphere gets damaged or just develops a bit slower, the right hemisphere goes into overdrive. It overcompensates, rewires itself, and boom, these incredible, specialized skills can suddenly emerge. So for most of us, our brain is running under what some scientists playfully call the tyranny of the left hemisphere. Think about it. When you look at a tree, you don't see a bazillion individual leaves and intricate patterns of light and shadow. You just see tree. That's your left brain taking a massive shortcut, filtering reality to give you the big picture. It's super efficient, but it means we miss almost all of the details. And this is exactly what happens when you escape that tyranny. Because their left hemisphere works differently, savants get what's called privileged access to the raw, unfiltered data of the world. They're not stuck with the simple label of tree. They see all the leaves, all the patterns, all the details. They build their world from the tiny parts up to the whole, instead of the other way around like the rest of us. Now, here's a really interesting clue that points to a biological cause for all this. When you look at who has savant syndrome, it is definitely not an even split between men and women. Check this out. The condition shows up in males about 6 times more often than in females. That's a huge difference, even bigger than the gender gap in autism. So why? While one leading idea is that it might be linked to testosterone exposure in the womb, which can sometimes slow down the development of that dominant left hemisphere, basically kicking off that whole right brain compensation process we were just talking about. Okay, I need you to brace yourself because this is where the story takes a truly mind-bending turn. What if these abilities aren't some rare fluke? What if a savant is literally hiding inside every single one of us, just waiting for a switch to be flipped? Let me introduce you to the acquired savants. These were totally ordinary people. Derek Amato hit his head on the bottom of a swimming pool, and a few days later, he could suddenly play the piano like a master, with no training at all. Jason Paget was violently attacked, and after his concussion, he started seeing the entire world as beautiful, complex mathematical fractals. These people are living proof that the machinery for genius might just exist in all our brains, lying dormant. And if you're thinking, okay, but those are just freak accidents, well, this is the kicker. Scientists can now do this on purpose in a lab. They use a safe technique with magnets, it's called RTMS, to temporarily quiet down that part of the left brain that does all the filtering. And guess what happens? For about an hour, ordinary people suddenly get way better at things like drawing realistically or spotting tiny errors in a text. The skill fades, but it proves the potential is there, inside all of us. So, all of this research leads us to the biggest questions of all. Are these skills something you're just born with, or can they be learned? And where in the world is all this science heading? The case of Daniel Tammet is the perfect snapshot of this whole debate. He's a savant who can actually tell us what's going on in his head. He sees numbers as having unique shapes and colors, which lets him do insane calculations and learn languages like Icelandic in a week. But some people argue he's really just using super advanced memory techniques that anyone could learn with enough practice. So is it a true gift of his brain wiring, or is it a skill he's perfected? The answer is probably somewhere in the middle. You know, the very latest genetic research is starting to clear things up a little. We're moving beyond thinking of this as just one syndrome. Instead, scientists are finding that these amazing abilities tend to show up in people who have a specific biological recipe. Certain brain circuits that are hyperactive, which leads to this incredible, intense hyperfocus. It's less about a disorder and more about finding a very specific biological signature for talent. And this all points to a pretty wild future. I mean, imagine a world of technological savantism, where you could safely and on demand flip a switch to turn off your brain's filters. You could tap into that raw, literal processing power to solve a crazy hard problem, see an art project from a completely new angle, or proofread a document with absolute perfection. And that really leaves us with this final, massive question. All the evidence is pointing to the idea that the hardware for genius isn't some rare gift. It seems to be built into all of us, just hidden away, suppressed. So the question is no longer if we can access it. The real question is, how could we, one day, choose to safely and ethically switch it on? What kind of potential is really waiting inside you?